A good evening to everyone listening this evening, and welcome to another night of our Health Week activities.
This is my Father's word, and to my listening ear, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the sphere. This is my Father's word, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world, the birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare the Maker's praise. This is my Father's world, he shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass, I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's word. Oh, let me never forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's word. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King. Let the heavens ring. God reigns. Let the earth be glad.
Good evening, all. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege whereby we can come together to discuss life's related problems, and we can find measures where we can embrace to be a better people, not just for this life, but for eternity. Lord, we ask that you be with the presenter as she presents a wealth of knowledge to us, the audience. Be with the audience, Lord, and may our enthusiasm be kindled. And as each one departs from this program, we may be better positioned to face life's challenges. Bless your people. Bless the undertakings of the health department of your church. These and other mercies we ask in Jesus' name. Amen and amen.
Good evening, church. The scripture reading is taken from Proverbs 4:20 to 23. Proverbs chapter 24, verses 20 to 23. I begin. My son, attend to my words. Incline thine ears unto my saying. Let them not depart from thine eyes. Keep them in the midst of thine heart. For they are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. Keep thine heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Here ended the reading of God's word.
Thank you very much. Without no further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Her name is Michele Blake. She has a master's degree in counseling from the North Carolina A&T State University in 1995. Presently, she is the director of counseling department in the Ministry of Social Development, Community and Gender Affairs, St. Kitts. Oversees counseling programs and interventions offered and supervises the counselors who work in the system. She directs supervisor for the Family Matters Program counselors, and this involves day-to-day supervision of cases. She's a trainer in a number of workshops related to development, a trained mediator working in the High Court, a trainer for substance abuse disorder professionals, train groups locally and regionally to provide intervention services for substance abuser. And this certification is through ISSUP, which is International Society of Substance Use Disorders. She's an online facilitator of UWI's master's program in counseling, and she is a facilitator for numerous workshops and present on numerous psychoeducational topics. She's also the executive member of the St. Kitts Mental Health Association, so she is well equipped to conduct this evening's session. So our topic this evening, the psychological impact of COVID and the effect on mental health. I present Dr. Miss Michele Blake.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Can someone give me sharing abilities, or could I just share? Let me see. Oh, I have sharing abilities. People can see that? Can people see that?
You can try sharing the screen again.
Okay, can we see it now?
Not as yet.
Okay, let's try again. Okay, let me try again. How about now?
No, not as yet.
All right, I'm not sure. Do I have sharing capabilities?
Yes, you should. You're a co-host.
Okay, let's try this again. So let's see, share. Okay, let's try it again. Share screen. Anything yet? No?
You might have to log out and then log back in.
I hope I don't have to do that. Let's try this. Share screen. So I'm sharing.
Can you try logging out and logging back in? See if that makes a
All right.
difference.
Okay, let me try. Okay, let me try again. All right, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try again now.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so I'm going to pull this and I'm going to share. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, we got it. All right, now I just need to go from slideshow. All right. Okay, good evening to the members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Thank you for inviting me to speak on a topic that I'm sure we've heard, you know, it's been a topic of discussion for over a year now, yet still it's so relevant because we are in a situation that is changing and has not changed. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. So the discussion on psychological health, mental health as it relates to COVID is always relevant. So it's important for us to talk today. So we're going to be talking for just until around 7, a little after 7 on the topic. Now, there's so much that could be said about the psychological impact of COVID on mental health. But I want to focus it in on a few things because sometimes when you put too many things out there, then everything gets lost. So I want to have a conversation. I want this to be conversational rather than sort of clinical presentation. And I want for it to be just very, just easy to understand and for people to grasp something with. So that will be how I focus today. So we are talking about COVID and mental health. And we can't talk about the impact of COVID on mental health before we understand what mental health is, because we have to have an understanding of what COVID is affecting. It's affecting something. And so the discussion is always about the mental health. So we have to understand what mental health is, because it's a word we throw around a lot. So when we talk about mental health and good mental health, we talk about emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So emotional has to do with how you think, how you feel, sorry. Psychological has to do with your thinking patterns, and social well-being, of course, has to do with the fact that we are social beings and we need to have social contact and engagement. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It determines how we handle stress, and it helps us to achieve a sense of balance in our world. And you see the little balancing figure over here. All right, so mental health is about balance. Now, what COVID has done, has thrown everything off balance. And so just by very nature of the fact that so many aspects of our lives, I mean, you know, this has affected how we think about our world, how we think about our experience, how we feel. And of course, that means our behavior has been impacted. So it means then that just by virtue of the fact that COVID has destabilized so much, it means that the potential is there, the possibility is there, that for many people, their mental health is has been affected. All of us, the mental health has been affected. Now, in order for us to, the goal always is to, as much as possible, keep our mental health in a positive place. So we always want to try and have good mental health. And that is something that we should do outside of COVID. That is something that we should do on a daily basis, on a regular basis, on an intentional basis. So in other words, we should not attend to our mental health just when things are in crisis, just like how we should not attend to our physical health only when we're sick. We should always be attending to our emotional and mental well-being. So how do we maintain that? What do we do on a regular basis to make sure that our mental health is maintained? So we maintain good mental health by our ability to control our world. All of us, from children come right up to adults, one of the things that keeps us in balance is our ability to control our world. And I mean control in a very positive way. We have to be able to predict, we have to be able to identify what needs to happen to keep us balanced, do those things, and expect that as a result of doing those things, we will have balance. That is what we mean by control. That is just a natural part of how humans function. So we maintain good mental health by that. We maintain good mental health by our social connections. And this is not to say that you have to be a person who is out and about a lot or has a lot of friends or whatever it is. Social connections simply mean that we have to be able to interact with people just through our humanness. So we have to be able to have good interpersonal skills. We have to be able to get something from someone and give something to someone. We have to be able to do that because that is how human beings are made. We're not made to live in isolation. And I'm going someplace with this because the things that we need to do to maintain good mental health, COVID is taken away from us. So our ability to work and provide, that is a very basic need that human beings have. Human beings have a basic need of being able to take care of themselves physically, feed themselves, shelter themselves, clothe themselves. And in order to have that, most of us have to work. So we have to have an ability to work and provide for our needs, our basic needs, our daily needs, so that our good mental health is maintained. Apart from the fact that those basic needs have to be met, we also want to work and provide on a higher order level for our children, our families, because related to that is the feeling of being productive and being needed. So you provide for your children and family. That provision makes you feel worthwhile. And so again, this is going someplace because COVID is taken away from all of that. We maintain good mental health by our ability to predict what our world will bound it, and it goes to control our world. So we need the ability to predict what our world would be like. So we need the ability, for example, to predict that if I work hard, if I go to work and I work hard and I follow the rules and I come in early and I do what I'm supposed to do, then I predict that I will have a job. And I predict that that job will allow me to maintain a lifestyle and take care of my family and so forth. COVID has taken away all of that. So all of a sudden people are in situations where they can't predict. So whether or not you've done everything you needed to do, play by the rules in every area of your life, all the things that you've done so that you could predict an outcome, all of a sudden now those things are in jeopardy. So the thing about COVID, and I've come to recognize this just over the duration of the year and something that we're dealing with it, is that it's affecting all of us. Now, it's affecting some people in a very direct and real way. So for example, if somebody has lost their job, we have a lot of people in the service industry who are hurting. And we could clearly see the link between their loss and the impact on their mental health. You've lost your job, it means that you have more stress, it means that you have more anxiety, it means that you're unsure about your future, and that affects your mental health. So that is directly related. But one of the things that COVID has done though, is it has linked even those of us who may not necessarily have that direct adverse impact from COVID. So those of us who may not necessarily be sick, those of us who have a roof over our house, a roof over our head, those of us who still have our jobs, those of us whose family are safe. We would think that because we have those things that we are immune to the stressors and the impact of the mental health impact of COVID. That is untrue. All of us are feeling something. And so how or why is this happening? We are all impacted because it's ongoing. It's around us. It's here in our communities. It's in the Caribbean. It's in the region. It's in the world. It's everywhere. It's ongoing. So because it's ongoing, just by natural contagion, we are going to be affected. And when you think of something as contagious, you think of, if you stand too close to somebody with it and it's contagious, then you'll get it, whatever the it is. So think of it in the same way, just in terms of an emotional connection. There is contagion that comes from the fact that this is all around us and ongoing all the time. There's no escape. We can't say, all right, well, I'm going to dissociate myself from X or Y or Z, and so I'll give myself a break. There's no escape, because we see in the news every day, we're hearing. Today, before this started, I was listening to the COVID update from St. Kitts. We're hearing things all the time. You're seeing it online. We live in a world that is connected. There's no escape. So because there's no escape, again, there's that contagion and connectedness. It's affecting all aspects of our life and all daily aspects of our life. So we're in a situation where we can't say, for example, that, all right, okay, I am going to separate myself from one aspect of it and focus on another aspect. It's affecting our social life. I mean, we were in periods where we were locked down and we were instructed not to go and visit anybody who doesn't live in the home that you live in. And I think we here in the Caribbean were even more fortunate than some, because I have friends who live abroad. I have friends that live in England. And there was, I remember in England, there was a strict, I mean, people were not seeing, not even their neighbors for months, couldn't leave the house, literally couldn't leave the house. Now, I just talked about the fact that we are social beings and we need social interaction and social connection. So if you are in a situation where COVID is affecting your ability to socialize, your ability to work, your ability to think clearly, your ability to have positive experiences, if it's affecting all of that, it's affecting all aspects of your life. Now, usually when we deal with anything stressful, there are some things that typically happen that allow us to deal with the stress. It allows our body to respond to the stress. It allows our mind to respond to the stress. And then typically the stress passes. So say, for example, you're in a situation where you may have lost a job. Let's just say you may have lost a job, but you may have been able to connect to family and friends. You may have been able to spend some time in other settings. You may have been able to go to church. You may have been able to do other things that would have made up for the loss in one area. With COVID, all of the areas are affected. So I may have lost a job, and I may not be able to connect spiritually with a source that is important for me, because churches have had to close. And I may not be able to spend the time in commune with people, because socializing has had to be affected. It may be a fact that it may not even be loss of job. It may be the fact that day in or day out, I do not know if my children are going to be able to go to school and how it's going to affect them. So COVID is affecting everything, every aspect of our life, everything that we've taken for granted, and it's turned that upside down. Again, we are impacted by it because it's a global experience, and I spoke to that earlier. Everybody is having it, so there's contagion. There's continuous information. So especially when this first started, it was difficult separating yourself from the information. It was just coming and coming and coming and coming at every angle. Every discussion was about COVID. Every talk was about the impact of COVID and what it was doing to life. So it was continuous information. And when you have information like that, you're continuously processing. And processing isn't only just a cognitive thing. So you're not just thinking about it, you're processing and you're thinking about it, and you are responding emotionally to what you're thinking about. So it wraps up your whole emotions and and cognition and how you think and how you feel. It wraps up everything. And so you imagine if this is going on and on and on and on, what it does to a person's mental health. It's just like it's undermining something on an ongoing basis. So when all of this is happening, all of these things that I'm just talking about, the ongoing and just overwhelming nature of COVID and the information, the fact that there's no escape, the fact that all aspects of life is touched, the fact that daily aspect of life is touched, the fact that it's a global experience. When we're experiencing all of that, it means then that these things are happening. It's increasing stress and anxiety without the opportunity to take a pause from that so that our body and our mind goes back to a resting state so that we could heal from the stress. So it's ongoing. So it means that it's taking a toll on us on an ongoing basis. It's creating an unbalanced reality that we can't seem to get back into balance. So when I first started out talking, I talked about balance and the need for balance as it relates to mental health. So with this ongoing thing without any kind of reprieve, where we're getting information left, right, and center, we're hearing about deaths, we're hearing about people with the loss of job. We're just hearing. We can't get back to that place of balance where we take information about adverse experiences and we balance that out with positive experiences. It's hard to get to that balance because it just seems like one is outdoing the other. So people with pre-existing mental health conditions are impacted because, so I talked about all of those things. I'm giving a context. People with pre-existing mental health concerns, people who have depression, people who have anxiety, people who are suffering from decreased mental health functioning, they are in a place with COVID where their situation is exacerbated because they're already feeling overwhelmed and violent and stressed in their situation. And then you add onto their situation these things that I'm just talking about, the isolation, the not knowing what is going to happen tomorrow, all those things. And it just adds to a pre-existing mental health condition. So people who have mental health conditions, we're a little bit more concerned about those people. And I'm not talking about people who are extremely mentally ill. I'm not talking about people who may necessarily have presenting issues like schizophrenia and those kinds of mental illnesses. I'm talking about pre-existing mental health conditions. I'm talking about people who suffer from anxiety. I'm talking about people who suffer from depression. Those are the two main ones. This COVID impacts them even more. So what are people feeling? When we try to get a sense of what people are feeling, as I said before, you have a couple of categories that we have to look at here. You have people who are directly impacted by COVID, whether through the fact that they got ill, they got the illness, and they've had to deal with that. Or it could be that there was loss of a job, loss of a family member, loss of connections, loss of all kinds of things. But the thing is, there are those people who have direct connections, but they're the rest of us, as I said, who may not necessarily have had any of those things happening. But what are we feeling? There's a general angst. And what I mean by that is, even if we're not directly impacted by the COVID-19, there's a general feeling that something is off, something is wrong, something isn't sitting right with our soul, something isn't sitting right with our experience. So that is what I call general angst. They're vague, unsettled feelings. So some of the vague, unsettled feelings that people have are directly related to their own battle. Because sometimes people feel, well, I should be grateful because I have my house and I still am able to get up every day and go to work. It might be virtual, but I have a job. I'm getting paid. I'm not sick. So I have everything to be grateful for and nothing to feel fearful about. And so people have their own battles with themselves because that causes a battle. Because it means then that people who feel like that would not have recognized or would not have identified that they have the right, just because they're a global citizen, they have the right to feel that angst that is pervading just the world. So people are feeling general angst, just vague, unsettled feelings. You can't really put your finger on why you feel blah, or you can't really put your finger on why you don't feel your usual self. But it's there, it's just an underlying unsettled feeling. They're confused feelings, as I said, especially if people have not been financially or in any health way impacted by COVID. So the confused feelings come from the notion that, why should I be feeling any kind of way? Because I have everything going good for me. So there's a confusion. And of course, many times people don't want to air those feelings or those thoughts because they may be met with, you shouldn't feel that way, you should be grateful because nothing is going on with you. So since that is what they're going to be met with, which is almost sounding a little bit judgmental to people, what they do is hold on to that confused feeling and don't make sense of it. So it's there, it's that unsettled feeling. You can't voice it because to your ears, it sounds like you're being ungrateful. And so you don't want to put that out there to sort of have that come back at you. So you stay there with the feeling and it just never gets sorted or processed. What are people feeling? People are feeling feelings that don't have a clear and identifiable source. And I spoke several times about that. That's what people are feeling. I can't put my finger on it. I shouldn't be feeling this way, but I am. And the people are feeling grief and loss experience in an unusual way. But what do I mean by that? Usually when we think about grief and loss, there's a very clear connection to where grief and loss come from. And we could identify some things that are very clear and usual. So the death of a loved one is a usual connection to grief and loss. Someone dies, you feel the pain, there is expected grief, you've lost someone, it's understandable. So that's a very typical pathway to grief and loss. But for many people, there has been a lot of loss from when COVID hit last year up until now, and it's ongoing. And because it's ongoing, it's one loss after the other, after the other, after the other. And so there is no one thing that you're grieving. You're grieving a lot of things in an unusual way. So what are some of the unusual things that we are grieving? Milestones. I remember for me, 2020 was supposed to be a year of a lot of family milestones. Birth of a family member, 2 significant birthdays, graduation, starting of university, all kinds of things, which normally would have been celebrated. None of them could have been celebrated. And so there's this sense of, there is something that is missing. There is something that was taken away. And grief is a response to when something is taken away and you have to process it and experience it and sort it through. So when all of these things come, so in one year, when there's so many things that would have been lost, it's difficult to lump all of those in one, basket and say, I'm experiencing loss. It's a loss of what would have been had we been able to get together for the birth of a family member. It's a loss of what it would have meant to celebrate someone graduating. Lots of different kinds of loss. So for a lot of people, some of those general, vague and unsettled feeling came from the fact that they were registering a lot of loss, but couldn't identify what it was. I remember when this first started and we were just new in terms of trying to understand it. And I had this discussion and some of the things that people were registering as loss as we started to talk were those normal things that we take for granted. Being able to walk down the road, walk about town and say hi to somebody. Because what was happening, we were in lockdown, so we couldn't walk around town and say hi to people. And then we had the masks on, so we couldn't see people. It's just a lot of loss. So one of the things is, as I said, we are processing loss and grief and not realizing that it's loss and grief that we are processing. So it becomes something vague and something that you can't put your finger on. So one of the things I've been saying a lot for the past year and a half, I've been telling this to people, it is normal to feel sad, confused, stressed, and scared, and the feelings are valid. So I say that to people because I don't want people to feel as if they have to battle these feelings. I shouldn't be feeling sad. I should have my act together. I don't have anything to stress about. I don't have anything to be scared about. It's normal to feel these feelings, whether or not you have had any direct impact of COVID or not. All of these things are our mental health. And as I said, we have shared feelings as human beings, as community, as the various kinds of community. We have shared experiences, and the shared experiences are affecting us whether we realize it or not. So it's normal and understandable for us to have these feelings. Now, when we think about risk, I just talk about the mental health impact. I just talked about people who have mental health conditions that make it harder for them to just, breeze through this, so to speak. But there are other people who have a mental health impact. You have older people, because we've heard this, certainly at the beginning, we've heard this constant narrative. Who are at risk? Older people are at risk. Now, if I'm an older person, I don't want to be just some sort of vague statistic. Oh, older people are at risk. I'm a person, I'm at risk, and it scares me. And if it scares me, it means then that I'm going to be trying to do things to keep myself safe. And the things that I'm trying to do to keep myself safe are actually contradictory to healthy human life. So the things that I'm doing to keep myself safe include staying away from social contact, staying away from family, staying away from church. So it affects my mental health. Then of course you have people with underlying issues, and that too was another message that was sent all the time, and it's continued to be sent. So sometimes when we hear about COVID, the question that people are asking is, were there underlying issues? Well, again, people with underlying issues are not just a statistic. They're people. They're people listening to me right now. They're people who have to go to work every day, who have underlying issues, who keep hearing on an ongoing basis about underlying issues, and for whom this is something very real that they have to process. People who generally have elevated levels of stress and anxiety, and I spoke to that already. These are people who are more at risk of just sort of crumbling under the weight, the mental health weight, the psychological weight of this ongoing pandemic. People who generally have depression, and people who are isolated or lonely. So people who are isolated in the first place have become even more isolated as a result of fears and as a result of anxieties, as a result of the protocols that are encouraged. They've become more isolated and lonely. And as human beings, that takes a toll on us. Okay. Now, so as I said today, we could talk on COVID for forever, but we have a particular time frame. So I wanted to just hit some points and just leave you with something. So if we're talking about COVID and mental health, the psychological impact on mental health, we have to be able to figure out, all right, how do we manage our mental health in COVID? How do we manage our mental health in COVID? The first one that I have there is one that I talk to people about all the time. And it just seems like it's such a, just something that people say, but it's important to be able to understand what it means. Identify what you can control and actively do that and focus on daily control. Now, there are so many things. Remember when I first started, I talked about the fact that balance and mental health and good mental health comes from our need as human beings to be able to control our environment. Now, one of the things that COVID has forced us to do is to reframe that notion of control. because control isn't just about what you can or cannot do. Control is also about how you interpret it and how you frame it. So say, for example, you may say, and I'm just giving an example of what control looks like. You may say, okay, I'm not able to go and visit my mother, or I haven't been able to go and visit my mother for a long time because, you know, my mother is older and at risk. And when we were at the height of the pandemic, that was not a good thing to do. So I wasn't able to visit my mother. So you could say, oh my goodness, the COVID is keeping me away from visiting my mother. I can't see my mother. Oh my gosh, it's the worst thing in the world. You can't control it because the COVID is here. They put in place protocols. We've had lockdowns where people couldn't move and so forth. But here is an example of how you could reframe it and control that. So instead of saying, oh my goodness, I can't go, I'm locked away, it's so hard for me, you could say, by not going to visit my mother, I am keeping my mother safe and I'm keeping myself safe. And safety is important for us right now. Now that is an example of controlling what you can, because that is you taking information that is there and reframing how you look at it with a sense of control. Because in that second statement, what you are saying is that you are actively doing something so that something could happen. It's not that something is being done to you. It's that you are doing something. And that is the shift from lack of control to control. And that could happen in everything that we do. We can take control. So identify what you can control and actively do that. We can't control the spread of coronavirus in the world. We can't control how we in our house manage our health. That's what we can control. We can't control the fact that you know, people may or may not be doing things that are required of them from the health services. I mean, we get angry about situations. We can't control that. But we can control our commitment to say, this is how I am going to function so that I do my part for me and my family. So how do we manage our mental health in COVID? We have to learn to reframe what control looks like, and we have to identify what we can control and actively do that. We have to focus on daily control. So whereas before, when things are in balance, we have the luxury of being able to look down the road 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month. You know, I'm planning to go away on vacation next month. I'm doing everything that I need to do to go away on vacation next month. What has happened is that a lot of things have been taken out of that long-term planning realm. So what can we control and focus on? We could control daily. So we could control when we get up today, this is how our house is going to function. When we get up today, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do to make sure that our routine is kept. This is what we're going to do to make sure our children are healthy. This is going to be what we do today to make sure that we feel accomplished, like we did something. Focus on daily control. So we're shifting it from looking down the road 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, to daily. And at the end of the day, that's it. You assess it. Was I able to do what I wanted to do today? Yes. Tick off this box, tick off this box, tick off this box. And there, with that comes a sense of achievement and control. Limit access to news outlets. Now, one of the things that people have been doing, I don't know if people still do it, is looking at everything that comes to them as it relates to COVID. And it certainly is understandable because as of March last year, all of us were thrown into something that nobody understood how to deal with. So of course, one of the ways that we needed to do one of the things we needed to do to figure out how to manage is to have information. And of course, it was something new and information was coming from everywhere. And one of these sort of intuitive things that people were doing was listening to all the information. Now, that is actually counterintuitive. So, well, actually, it seems like it's intuitive, but it's not. It's counterintuitive. Because the more we listen to more and more and more and more and more and more, the more it destabilizes our sense of balance and the more anxiety that is built. So when you listen to 40 news items per day as it relates to COVID, or look at 40 things as it relates to COVID, it means that each one of those 40 things you're going to have to take in, you're going to have to process, you're going to have to respond to, you're going to have to react to, you're going to have different feelings for each one of them. And all of that is just like it's like your emotions doing a work. It's tiring. So just in terms of how to manage your mental health, one of the things that is suggested, WHO, PAHO, everybody who deals with health in any kind of way have said, look, limit your access to news outlets. Make a plan for yourself. I am going to check in daily, just find out what's going on. I'm going to check in daily with what's going on in my country. So I'm going to check this news site, whether it is my local radio station or whatever it is. And then that's it. I'm going to check in daily. So one for what's going on in my country and one for what's going on in the world. So between 6 and 7 at night, I'm going to watch world news. I'm going to take that in, and then I'm going to be done with it. That's important, and that's where your control is, because it puts you in a place now where you're able to have other experiences other than just the anxiety-producing turmoil that comes as a result of just not knowing. Use reputable news outlets. Like everything that is virtual, any opportunity there is for something negative to seep in, it will. So of course, virtual means, the fact that we have virtual means and access to information is a good thing. But with everything good comes something negative. So there have been situations where entities, people, individuals, groups have tried to undermine what is happening and put fake news out there. And so apart from having to deal with all of the information that you have as a result of COVID, you also have to deal with scary information or information that you just don't know how to interpret. So using only reputable news outlets help you to manage your own processing. Routines help to undermine anxiety. Anxiety and routines can work together, because anxiety is putting you in a place where your thoughts and your feelings are just unfettered. They're just going, right? What routines allow you to do is have something predictable. So I know that every day I'll get up at this time. I know that when I get up at this time, I'll do this first. Then I know I'll shower. I know I have my breakfast at this time. I know I'll take a break at this time. I know I'll exercise at this time. It allows you to be able to predict your day. And being able to predict your day, remember we talked about it when we talked first, being able to predict your world, whatever your world is, your space, helps to manage anxiety. So what routines do is they give you the ability to predict, to have some predictability in your day. And as you have that predictability in your day, you know what to expect, you know what outcomes to expect, and it puts you in a place where your anxiety is reduced. So have routines and stay with them. That is especially true for young children and teenagers whose routines right now are really just being destabilized. School start, and then within a week of school start, it stopped, and then school, the whole class, and then the whole school, everything. And so they don't know what to expect. And for children and adolescents, their world is school. That's their world. And so that is for them, their world falling apart. And I should say while I'm at it, for those of you who have children, do not minimize that. Do not say, well, you know, it's only school, or girl, that ain't nothing, or man, don't worry about that. School is your world. So just like how I'm talking about for adults, our world is related to the fact that we need to be able to provide for ourselves and be financially stable and know what to expect and so forth. That's our world. The world for children and adolescents is school. And the peer relationships that come in school, and the peer facilitation and everything that comes with their school life. And so their world is destabilized right now. How do we manage our mental health in COVID? Keep yourself healthy and balanced. And we could do that emotionally, and we're talking about emotionally, but you also have to do that physically. I was just listening to Dr. Laws before we came on here, and she was suggesting that even for people who are in isolation or in quarantine, exercise. So you may not be able to walk down the road or walk along the pathway or whatever it is, but you could move, even if you're not feeling 100%, you could move, you could do some things within your space. exercising and keeping a healthy physical diet, eating on time. One of the things sometimes when people become down and just start to stress and just feel angst and don't have any energy, the first thing that is affected is eating and sleeping, either in too much or too little. And that's, you know, a sign for people to watch within themselves, too much or too little. So, you know, people may not feel the need to prepare a healthy breakfast or prepare a healthy lunch or prepare a healthy dinner. So they may pick at something or whatever it is. But the fact is our mind, body, and soul work together, and they are impacted by and impact each other. And so if there's a lot of stress going on and you're not eating, it affects your body, you're more likely to get sick, your immune system is weakened. We understand that whole interplay. So it's important in terms of managing to keep that, keep a healthy diet. Now, we need to actively manage all aspects of our life. And the main aspect of our lives are the emotional, the psychological, the financial, the social, and the spiritual. So in order to make sure that you keep yourself emotionally, mentally healthy in a COVID era, you have to do these, you have to look at these things specifically. In other words, don't just by the way kind of decide to do something to address your psychological well-being or your financial well-being. It has to be intentional, it has to be well thought out, it has to be something you intend to do, commit to do, and do. So physical self-care, we're talking about not using any kind of substance in excess in order to dull feelings. And so sometimes people do that. They use drugs and alcohol, and we know that. But sometimes people also use food as a way of dulling feelings. So anything that is used to dull emotions and feelings should not be a part of physical self-care. Physical self-care, as I just said, is about taking care of your body, the rest that your body needs, the food that your body needs in order to be able to fight the emotional and physical impact of COVID. Emotional self-care, feel feelings. Experience your grief. A lot of us, as I said, are experiencing grief. We have lost a lot. And I go back to grief for a second. Grief doesn't even have to be those big major things like milestones. And as I said, we miss the grief. We mourn some of the normalcies. I know for me, one of the things that I look forward to, like when I'm on my way to work, is rounding the corner and in certain times of the year, seeing a cruise ship, 1 or 2 cruise ships there. And one of the things I recognize is with COVID and everything having to stop and so forth, I'd come down and I'd look in the harbor and be like, oh, you know, life has changed. Or just hearing the planes, every day you'd hear American Airlines pass and all of a sudden there's none. So these are the things. So grief isn't just about the big losses. Grief are about the little ways that life have changed and that we have to always be aware of. So we have to process that as grief. We have to understand it as grief, and we have to process it as grief. We feel sad because we've lost things. So grief, sadness, trauma. For some people, the trauma comes from experiences that they have, fears. I'm working, I'm taking care of myself, and then all of a sudden there's an outbreak of COVID at my workplace, and there's a potential that it was spread and everybody's sick and there's fear. It's just traumatic. So we have to be able to, with emotional self-care, what we're saying is people have to be able to recognize these feelings as real, not push them aside anywhere, but feel them, experience them. Now, feel them and experience them doesn't mean that you overwhelm yourself and you stay all day feeling sad, but you recognize that you are sad and you're sad because, and you sit with it for a bit, you sit with it. And it's only when you sit with it and you allow yourself to process it that you can move through it. So we have to take care of our emotional self. We have to take care of our psychological self before I get to social. We have to take care of our psychological self. And our psychological self relates to our thoughts and our interpretation of things. So we have to pay special attention to what we are saying to ourselves, to what we are expecting. So if we're saying to ourselves, oh my goodness, the situation is gloomy, doomy, it'll never change, this is the worst thing that ever happened, oh my goodness, I'll never get through this. You are creating within yourself a a hole, a dark hole, which is easy to fall into and difficult to get out of. So remember, I talked about reinterpreting your experience as one through which you can. And this is what you can do, and you do what you can do. As it relates to our health, we have to take care of our social self. And again, social doesn't necessarily mean going out and about. Social means connections. One of the things that COVID allowed a lot of people to do, I heard a lot of people who did it. When it first came on the scene, of course, when it was new, the amount of Zoom family meetings that were happening, which had a lot of positives. Now, obviously, there is something more beneficial that comes in face-to-face contact. But what it was allowing people to do was think outside the box and say, wait a minute, we could do this. And so people who may have been outside of the social circle because, you know, they don't live close enough or they don't live in the same country, all of a sudden we recognize that we could add them to a Zoom meeting, and we have Zoom family meetings on a Sunday or Saturday, whatever it is. And so there were opportunities for socializing. The point that I'm making here is whether it be physical connection or not, we need to have social contact. We need to have people with whom we connect, people with whom we bounce things off of, so that we could reinterpret our experiences. We could get an ear for interpreting something else. We have social contact. So it's important for us to actively seek out social contact and not isolate. Spiritual self-care. Spiritual self-care includes a group like what you are, a group of Christians who are worshiping. So you have the church there. But spiritual self-care also involves a whole lot of other things. So you may be spiritually grounded by going to church, but you may be spiritually grounded by getting up in the morning and watching the sun coming up and connecting to nature and the wonder of nature and the fact that there is something bigger and something more omnipotent than us. So it could be something, spending time on your gallery looking at nature. It could be yoga. It could be sitting and just going into yourself and paying attention to yourself. So spiritual doesn't only mean church. So when opportunities for church are lost, just remembering that connecting to something bigger is what spirituality is all about. Finding your space and your place in a bigger system. And however that is done, it's important to do that on a regular basis. Spiritual self-care. So just touching on some things here. Physical, you're talking about sleep, walking, physical release, just sitting by your desk, because so many people now are working from home and they're sitting at a desk all day, and they're there all day, and then the same space that you sit at all day becomes a space that is your space for living. So things are, just enmeshed and murky. So it's important to have some definition. So physically just moving, even if you sit at your desk, as I said, just doing some breathing exercises or stretching exercises, getting up, moving, walking around your house, walking around your gallery. It's important to do that. As it relates to emotional self-care, we have to take care of stress. We have to manage our stress. Stress is something that is subjective. So you have to identify within you what is causing you stress. What is causing you stress in this whole new COVID era? What might be causing me stress may not be the same thing that's causing you stress. So whatever is causing you stress, identify it so that you could manage it. Does it mean that you have to develop some other coping skills? Does it mean that you have to write so that stress could come out? Does it mean that you have to do something physical? Whatever the stressor is for you, once it's identified, then you have to be able to manage it. There must be emotional maturity, and that means simply what I just said in this slide before the last. You have to be able to identify your feelings, recognize that they're real, and deal with them. So emotional maturity, for example, isn't screaming and lashing out at somebody because you are hurt. Emotional maturity is recognizing that you are hurt or you are stressed, and that it's your stress and that you need to sit down and deal with it on your own. Forgiveness, compassion, kindness, those are all things that that contribute to your emotions balancing out. As it relates to social, having support systems and positive social media interaction, positive communication, time together, being able to ask for help. Sometimes that is difficult for people to do because people tend to want to give a lot but not accept help. They feel as if that shows some weakness. Certainly in this time where everybody is just off balance and off key, there needs to be more asking for and giving of help, because as I said when I started, all of us are in this boat, and whether we realize it or not, there's contagion happening. We all need something. And so in terms of social, we create safe boundaries. What needs to happen so that I could feel safe? Does it mean that I need to be out and about with everybody? Does it mean that I need to keep my circle small but impactful for me? What does that mean? And create the boundaries. Certainly with respect to spirituality, time in spiritual connections, meditation, yoga, just connecting, just having whatever journey allows you to remember that there is something bigger than you. You're connected to something. And that whole notion of connectedness helps people to feel calm. Certainly in terms of just your personal thing, just knowing your hobby, knowing yourself, personal identity, honoring your true self. Who am I? What am I about? What do I like? What am I good at? And remember, I'm talking about doing all of these intentionally on a regular basis so that your mental health could be managed, so that it could offset some of the very real impact of COVID. Just in terms of your space, have safe space, healthy living environments, secure and stable living environment, organized space, financial, especially right now, making sure that your money is doing what it needs to do. So am I saving enough? Am I saving too much? Am I budgeting properly? And budgeting is something that the whole family could get involved in, including children. And that too helps with managing the emotions and the psychological health of the family, because children have a say. So your 12-year-old may be able to say, well, you know, one of the things I think is good for us to do is maybe we could, I don't know, not buy popcorn every Friday in school. So we just buy it maybe once a month. And what we don't want to say to something as small as that is, well, that ain't nothing, don't worry about that. It's somebody contributing in the way that they could to the family unit. And it's important for us to recognize that all of that and all of those things are addressed, all of those contribute to positive mental health. So certainly in terms of work, just managing your work and home life, balancing the two, making sure even at work, you don't take on what you can't take on. The work part of it, I think, has gotten a bit enmeshed in this COVID era. I certainly have heard stories of people who have had a hard time separating from work. So you're working from home, and first thing that happens is that you could move from your bedroom to your computer without anybody seeing you. So you don't even have to do some of the routines that you would have had to do had you had to go to work. So you may not necessarily have to get up and dress and so forth. So you go down to your computer and you're behind a screen. And so you're doing whatever work without having some of the natural things that may have worked in a different setting. So not connecting to somebody socially, not seeing a face in front of you, not reading an expression, not moving away from your desk and having a different type of interaction. And then another thing that happens is your time becomes enmeshed. So because I'm home and I'm just moving from bedroom to computer, then I find that I spend a lot more time on my computer. So I'm doing more work because I'm here anyway, so I might as well just do. So just some of these things that don't seem so defined, but are all very important as we look at mental health in this COVID era. So just closing off, this sort of puts it in just a general perspective. Have a routine, structure your day, and keep good habits. good habits, not just habits, good habits. Structure your day. This is what I'm going to do today. This is what I want to accomplish. Take deep breaths. Breathing exercises can ease stress, and they can happen anywhere. They could happen when you're in the kitchen. They could happen when you're sitting on the front porch. They could happen when you're sitting by your desk. Reach out to a loved one. This is part of your social. Connect. Lean on each other for support. Receive support as well as give support. Have fun. Find hobbies. I remember when the lockdown first started, I realized that I liked art. So art, just like what this is here. So I went and I got a couple of paint brushes and paints and so forth from Harper's. And in the days when we couldn't move, I sat on my gallery and painted. And it's something that I did not realize that I liked, and I really enjoyed it. It was very relaxing. So have some fun. Yes, you are in, or we all are in times that are difficult. We all are in times that are unsure. But again, remember what I said, that cannot be your experience every day, all day. There must be a break for something else so that your emotions could have a different experience. You could feel something else. Because if you're feeling negativity and stress and sadness and anxiety all day, every day, then you're putting yourself at risk for emotional and physical illness. Doing something as simple as just getting sunlight. Dr. Laws talks about it all the time. There's something about sunlight and its impact on your physical health, but also on your mental health. I don't know if anybody has ever been in a situation where you've just felt kind of out of sorts, and just sitting down and getting some sun on you, you just feel better. So there is something about sunlight to be able to improve your mood, and it improves your physical health, and just helping others. So again, this comes from a sense of control. So I may not be able to control what's going on around me in the world, but I could control how I deal with my neighbor down the road, or I could control how I deal with this person who is in need. Those are the things you can control. And there is something positive that comes with helping and giving of self, because it allows you to step outside of the feelings that you're having and have a different experience. And you've heard me say time and time throughout this presentation about having a different experience. And so I want for you to realize that the trick is, just in terms of keeping your mental health positive, have different experiences. Do not get stuck in one experience. And if we're not careful, the COVID experience could get us stuck in that one experience of, oh my goodness, what is going on in the world? We're all just doomed. We're not going to get out of this. We're going to have death and destruction. If you're not careful, you could get caught in that one experience. So it's important for you to use your own sense of control to pull yourself out of that experience and have other experiences. Does it mean that you're minimizing the realities of what's going on around? No. That's not what it means. Does it mean that it means that you just sort of carelessly disregard what needs to happen to take care of yourself? No, that's not what it means. It means that there's a balance between doing what you can do with the information that you have, and then at the same time, doing other things that you can do also with the information that you have, because we have information about positive things and positive experiences too that we could be a part of. So it's about, at the end of the day, your psychological well-being is about finding and keeping balance in your life. And that, in a nutshell, speaks to what I wanted to talk with you about. I think we were smack bam on the hour that I was given. I was given an hour, so I think we started just at about 20 after 6, so it's now 7:15. And I think I was able to sort of get the main points that I wanted to get across to you in this time frame. So I'm going to pause there. I am not sure what the what happens after this in terms of if there is some room for a couple of questions. But this is, in essence, what I wanted to bring to you today. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to ask?
Thank you, Dr. Blake. It is that we'll have 20 minutes of questions and answers. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask your questions.
And if there are no questions, it's about this particularly, if there's anything that anybody wanted to find out as it relates to just anything else in mental health and just keeping one's mental health intact, that is also something that could be asked.
All right, good night.
I see there's a chat. Okay, someone is liking the presentation. Thank you. What advice would you give to persons struggling with maintaining a routine? Okay, so sometimes it's hard to put together a whole routine, especially if a person is coming out of a struggle, and the person used the word struggling. So there's going to be some struggle that comes from the fact that, look, I already having it hard, I have to deal with all these kinds of things. To put together a whole routine for a day just seems like it just overwhelms the situation. So what I would say to that is, if you're struggling with putting together a routine for a day, put together a routine for one thing. Now remember, what routine means is just doing something that you plan to do. So if it is overwhelming to get to think of a whole daily routine, put together a routine for preparing breakfast. So the routine could be that I do it every morning at 8 o'clock, and that's it. The rest of the day could be things, nothing has gone as it was planned, but I know for breakfast, I'm doing it at 8, and we're sitting down at 8 o'clock. The point that I'm making is, even if you focus on something small, just one thing, it is considered a routine, because it's you intentionally doing it, it's you planning to do it, it's you knowing what is going to happen as a result of doing it. So if there is struggle in putting together a whole routine, put together one something. So focus on one something and build from that. Good question.
There is a hand raised. Pastor Elliott.
All right, good night, everybody. Excellent presentation. However, Dr. Blake, how would you help someone deal with denial? All of a sudden, we can't travel, we can't go to church, we can't do this. And so coupled with the psychological effect is denial. How do you, yeah.
I would give them grace in their denial, because denial in what is going on right now is actually a way that some people are coping. No, is it a healthy way to cope long term? No. But for some people, escaping from all of what is playing out and what is happening, denial is an escape. And so I started off by saying I would give them grace, meaning that I would look at it from the point of view of it is needed for them they need to be in denial to take care of an aspect of themselves. And I think if you start with it from a point of grace and understanding, and I know grace and understanding is something that we all are aware of. The goal isn't to recognize denial and push somebody outside of it. The goal is to recognize denial, and the question to be asked is, what is making this person stay here? And I think if that is where you start, then you'll be able to meet them at some place. You'll be able to meet them at their fears. You'll be able to meet them at their concerns, which are all real. You'll be able to meet them at their anxieties. You'll be able to meet them at their stress. So denial, certainly in clinical terms, certainly from a counseling perspective, we see denial as something that indicates that a person is having difficulty and struggling, which is different to they're just not facing reality. All right, so a person might be in denial because to have to accept loss and grief and don't know what the future is going to look like and miss all the things that were important to me and don't know if I'm going to have a job and don't know if my mother is going to get sick and don't know. I just it's just easier for me to not go there. And that may be a way, as I said, of them coping with the situation at the time. So for me, if a person was in denial, I might try to find out, as I said, give them grace. I might try to find out all the things that are on the plate and, just have a different conversation. Now, what are all the things that you're dealing with when you think of this, of COVID? What are all the things that scare you and affect you? That's a different conversation. And out of it, you may get a sense of why denial is there to help a person manage. Let's see some questions. I'm a very social person. I'm constantly anxious about being locked away and isolated with no one to interact with if I contract COVID. Your presentation provided very practical coping. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, for again, COVID has interfered with our natural being. So for people who automatically connect and get their energy and their joy and their life from connection, and then all of a sudden the message is you can't connect because you could either get COVID or pass COVID on and so forth. And so this fear is introduced. It just brings instability into your space. And so apart from having to deal with the external stuff, you have to deal with your internal struggle. So it is a lot. It is a lot. Right. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to ask?
I see another message in the chat. How do you manage your mental health when everyone is at home? You are unemployed, stressed, and anxious during lockdown. Yep.
That is one of those things where you live alone. Oh, you live alone. Okay, I don't think I see that one. You live alone, you're unemployed. No, you live with people, you're unemployed and stressed. That is one of those things where you're gonna have to go back to controlling what you can. And this notion of controlling what you can really takes some work to reframe, because on your plate is living with people in the house. No doubt that the people in the house also add more stress to you if you're already in a stressed place. Unemployed, and of course that comes with very natural and normal worries. You were trying to figure out how to pay your bills, how to feed your family, how to keep the roof over your head. I mean, those fears don't go away, right? Or they just don't sort of disappear. So these are very real things. And one of the things I don't want people to go away with is that, the things that are happening ought to be minimized. So you just sort of push them away and go on. No, these are very real things. So there are a couple of things I talked about. I talked about the willingness to sit with these strong feelings. The willingness to sit with yourself and recognize I am stressed. Why am I stressed? I'm stressed because A, B, C, D, E. I am frustrated, I'm sad because these things. And sit with those feelings. Because when you sit with those feelings and you allow them to process, it then allows you to move to the next stage of, all right, what can I do in this situation? So there are lots of other people in the house. And so one of the things is that all of these people are probably adding more stress to me. Can there be a conversation with everybody in the house where we talk about and agree on perhaps quiet time and what quiet time looks like, or private time for half an hour a day, whatever it is. In other words, it problem solves. It opens up the opportunity for addressing something that comes with communicating with the other members and the people in the house. And it may also come with some surprises in terms of what suggestions are offered. But the point that I'm making is once you identify and sit with the feeling, you don't try to push it away. Oh goodness, I don't want to feel this way, so you push it away. You have to sit with it. You have to feel the discomfort that comes with it. You have to process it and feel it. But out of that, then usually comes the ability to say, all right, what do I need to do to address this? And again, this is one of those situations where no one may be able to say to you, oh, you lost your job, so here is a job. That may not be what the help is. But your willingness to speak to others, your willingness to connect with others may give you some ideas about how to manage what resources you have, or what to do in terms of who could help and who can't help. The point is, it connects you to problem solving, which is not going to be there if you just sit with yourself and be stressed and focus on the stress. How do you deal with that uneasy feeling, the feeling that you can't put your finger on? Well, one of the things is information gives you knowledge. And so one of the things now is that you are now, because the thing about the uneasy feeling that you can't put your finger on is you can't connect it to anything. But hopefully after a session like this, you could connect it to something. You could connect it to loss. You could connect it to sadness. You could connect it to global concern about what is going on. So it all of a sudden now, it's not just uneasy, vague feeling. You have an understanding of what it is about. So if you have an understanding of what it is about, you can process it through that. So you could sit with your vague, uneasy feelings and dig down, because it's not, as I said, it's no longer just something that you can't put your finger on. You could identify that, you know what, I have this angst that is just there. I know that is probably related to the fact that there is so much loss going on around me that it is affecting me. And so you sit with that and recognize I am affected. And when you do something like that, you move things out of the way. You move out of the way this notion that, well, I don't have anything to be upset about, or I don't have anything to be anxious about. You move that out of the way by admitting and recognizing that I am a part of this, and this is what is contributing to that. And that is the first step. Connecting is the first step toward to then processing it and experiencing it. Let me see. Let's see. Okay, that was that. Okay, in times like these, would you encourage a person to practice slow living? If so, do you have any tips for persons who already have a packed life and find it difficult to practice slow living? So I wouldn't encourage anybody. What I would encourage people to do is practice what feels right to you, which goes back to what I said, is you have to pay attention to your feelings. So I'm not sure if I know what slow living means. I guess it means just slowing things down, right? So what I'm saying is there's no right or wrong that needs to happen. If I have to slow it down, I have to slow it down because this, that, or the other. If I am slowing it down, I am slowing it down because I see that there's some benefits that come in slowing it down, and I recognize that. So out of the slowing it down, instead of mourning the loss that I had to slow it down, I am now recognizing a benefit and I'm focusing on that benefit. So it's about switching your thought patterns or your interpretation with your choice. All right, so your choice to slow living, to enter into slow living comes as a result of something. And so whatever that something is, you have to honor it, you have to respect it. I'm choosing to slow down because that's value right there. So since there's value there, then you start to create a valuable narrative around that, and don't connect it with one of disempowerment, or I have to slow down because of this COVID and everything that's going on. You make a choice, and that choice has value to you, and out of that choice and that value, you start to honor it, if that makes sense. Yes. How can one manage their mental health if they're getting significant stress from both the home front and the job? That is what is happening to a lot of people. I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. But I've talked with y'all all day about some things which, well, for the hour, about some things which I want you to hold on to. Intentionality. I want you to, one, recognize that you are under higher stress than normal. Job stress, home stress, everything stress. So recognize that you are. Since you recognize that you are, it means then that you have to do intentional things to manage them. So the stress can be managed, by the way. The stress can be managed passively. it must be intentional. So every day I have to get up and say, okay, I recognize that today that I am under stress. I am under a little bit more stress because my job is asking 1, 2, and 3 of me. If you could name the stressors, that's important because you move it again from vague to specific. What are the stresses on my job? 1, 2, and 3. What are the stresses at home? A, B, and C. You have to be able to do that because in order then to move on to processing it and doing something about it, you have to know what it is. So it can't be just a general sort of stress. And the more people are able to hone in on what the stressors are, the more they're able to say, okay, so this is the situation that I'm dealing with at work. These are some options that perhaps could address this, because certainly when we sit down with people, as you start to talk with people and narrow, hone them in, people come up with their own solutions that they may not have had access to because everything is just sort of jumbled into one sort of vague, it's just so much stress. As you start to pinpoint what exactly are the stressors, and they start to pinpoint them, and you hear conversations like, well, this isn't so bad, I could manage this. So all of a sudden, little bit by little bit, you start to move some things off the plate. And so when you start to pick it apart, you might realize that it's 2 things that on the job stress me out. And, whereas I thought it was everything about the job that stressed me out. So just in terms of honing in on identifying what is stressing me, puts you in the driver's seat for then being able to address it. Perhaps 1 or 2 more, and then we could wrap it up.
There was one in the chat also asking, how can one care for the senior, how can one care for the mental health?
Oh, mental health, I see that, yes.
Yes.
Mental health of seniors who live alone, right. Now, I know one of the things that happened when there was lockdown is a lot of seniors were caught in that. And apart from the fact that they depended on some of their normal settings, seniors depended on going to church and going down the road by the shop to pick up their, whatever it is. And those were social connections, or going by the post office to get their mail or to get their check or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, all of those were gone. And so how do you care for the mental health of seniors who live alone? One of the things is I would recognize, and some of these seniors don't have a lot of knowledge about FaceTime and phone and all those kinds of things. So one of the things that we encourage people to do is if there is a community of someone living next to, close enough to, seeing if that could be something that helps. So I live here, and usually the person who comes to visit me is somebody who lives in another community. But is there any way of getting some help from the people around? So there's a neighbor or something who connects, or there's a neighbor who is able to check for the person. That's something that's important. If it's a person who you can call on the phone, okay, so they may not be up to date with the more complicated aspects of virtual interaction, but they may be able to take up a phone and say hello and really appreciate a call from you. So that is something, again, that's important to do, and something that could be done. There is not a whole lot that could happen for seniors living alone, but when you do get a chance to touch base with them, just passing on the message that you're there, that even though you may not be there physically, that you are in their space and that you are really concerned about them. Encourage them, if they could, to jot down things that they want to talk with you about when they see you or when they are able to talk with you. So that is important for them in their mental health. I don't know if sometimes, again, people have the ability to read, or people have the ability to do some cognitive things for themselves. So certainly encouraging some of that. So even if they're not able to be, they're not someone that you could visit with on a daily basis, just having them have something to spur on their cognition. I know my mother-in-law is 91, and she has all of these, they're like for children, these crayon, these books with coloring and so forth, and she really enjoys them. She really enjoys them. Another thing, she has all of these big word search, very simple word searches that are big because again, eyesight has to be taken into consideration. But the point is, it's about how we message to them the alone versus loneliness. And so the message is about not being able to be there all the time by you because wanting to keep you safe. But when we are not there, what are the things that we are doing or could be done or you could do to make sure you recognize that we're still in your space? And maybe one more. Okay. It seems as if we ventilated quite a lot. As I said, I know this is a topic that can be talked about. It has been talked about for a year and something. And it can be talked about and talked about and talked about because the fact is we are all affected by what COVID is doing to our world and to our experience as people. The thing that I want to highlight again, as I said, is even though you may not think that there is an impact on you, the mental health impact on you, there probably is. So operate as if you are proactively taking care of yourself, because there are lots of things that are underlying that have affected you and will affect you that may not necessarily have a face that you could pinpoint. So in order to just make sure that you keep balance, just make sure you actively take care of as many things as you could to provide routine, to provide a sense of predictability, to provide a sense of control. Whatever little thing that you do to help provide those things, it helps in just sort of keeping you balanced until we get through this, this time in our lives. So I come to the end here and thank you for very engaging questions and for listening to me this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Blake. I would like to say thank you for your presentation, your timely presentation that you have given to us this evening. It's a necessary topic indeed, as we gathered from the presentation, the effects of COVID on mental health and practical ways to take control. I would also like to say thanks to all who participated this evening and to all our listening audience. Thank you very much.
Okay.
At this time, we'll have our gem and closing feature by Pastor Elliott.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you.
All right, good evening. And I just want to say, job well done by Dr. Blake. Dr. Blake, I was blessed at your feet tonight. And I do express my appreciation. And for all those who would have come by to be on this platform. What I just want to deal with in the next 3 minutes, I just want to tie in the spiritual component of all that has happened from the presentation and all that is happening now with the COVID-19. And I want to bring a situation before us. It is taken from Psalms, the 42nd division of the Psalm, and verse 4. It says, "When I remembered these things, I pour out my soul in me, for I had gone with the multitude. I went with them to the house of God, with the voice of joy and praise, with a multitude that kept holy day." Now, here is the psalmist David, the shepherd David. David was accustomed to like what we used to accustom to, and that is our social life, going to church and all of that. But David has found himself in a situation where he is now hunted. And he's a fugitive in the desert. And he had no family, no friends, no neighbor, no co-worker, no church member, nobody. He didn't have a cell phone, no WhatsApp, no Twitter, nothing. And so he had to be all by himself. He is now going through the process of analyzing what is happening to him. And COVID-19 has done just that for us. And so what the spiritual component of this whole experience of the COVID-19 is that I want to bring to our minds that in as much as the mental and the social and the physical, they are important, the spiritual plays an integral part in our total being. And so there are some texts that, take for instance, in Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, the Bible is talking about the renewing of our minds. So that while we are going through this pandemic, this high level of uncertainty, we need not worry and fret ourselves, because here is David, and the only arsenal that he had left with him was his spiritual life. And the text that I just read, Psalm 42 and verse 4, David was questioning himself as to what is happening. Mentally, he was taxed, he was drained. And here is David under a tree in the middle of the day. The sun is hot and a deer is coming. The pandemic is here. And David, while he's confused and worried and disturbed, he looked at the deer and he said, wow, just as that deer is panting after the water brook, so is my soul. My soul is longing for God, to be in the presence of God. And so while we are going through this pandemic, just like David, we can draw from the pandemic spiritual lessons that we can apply to our lives so that we can be better as we survive this COVID-19. And so Philippians chapter 2 and verse 5 talks about, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Once we apply these things to our lives, it helps to reform and to revive and to renew our thinking, our spiritual being, our entire being. And so what happens? 3 John 2 says, beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. And so what happens? In order for us to experience that spiritual renewal, we have to be able, like David, to call upon our God. And how do we do that? By singing and praying. And even though we cannot be at church in the sanctuary, we still have Zoom, we still have YouTube that we can tap into. Use what is there so that you can experience that renewal. And so once we get into singing, I was doing some research on music and the role it plays. The music is the only entity that enters the mind, the brain, with us giving it any permission. That is the hypothalamus region of the brain. And so what happens there also is once we burst into singing, into praying, into exaltation, into greetings, into adoration to our great God, what happens? The brain produces chemicals that helps us to feel better. And the doctors would agree with me here, and the nurses. Some of those chemicals that the brain produces, 4 major types, is the dopamine, we have the serotonin, we have the oxytocin, and we have endorphin. So once we delve and cause ourselves to burst out into praying and to singing and to adoration, then we can experience a renewing. And all of this can be done amidst the COVID-19. So in as much as we are taxed mentally, physically, financially, and otherwise socially, we have an arsenal that we can tap into, and that is our spiritual connection with God. And as long as you and I are spiritually connected to God, we can experience, because we know sadness dries the bone, but joy fattens our bone. And so I want to submit to us tonight. Let us get into the habit of praying and singing and worshiping. You can even walk around your house. There are lots of benefits to be derived, because once you are sick, we are told from studies that once you approach the spiritual aspect of your life and you get into singing and praying and Adoration, the mind produces chemicals that cause you to feel good and as a result feel better. So may God help us tonight as we go through this pandemic. We want to say thanks for the presentations thus far during this health week, and that we would continue to log on so that we can find resources to help us to cope. And so the spiritual aspect plays an integral part in our development, in our health, in our mental state, our social state, our physical state. And so I submit to us tonight, hold on to God. Pray more, sing more, have family worship, read your Bible. All these help in the process in our spiritual walk with God. And once we are walking with God, we know that in spite of what is happening, that we can experience good health because we are with God. So may God bless all of us as we continue to hold on to the unchanging hand of God. And then David says in verse 11 of Psalm 42, verse 11 of Psalm 42, that's the final text there. Verse 11 of Psalm 42, he says here, "Why art thou cast down, O my soul? And why art thou disquieted within me?" These are questions. "Hope thou in God, for I shall yet praise him." So you see what happens? God inhabits the praises of his children. Who is the health? God is the health of my countenance and my God. What a word tonight. May God bless us as we continue to praise him, to worship him, to lift up our voices. And as a result, we would experience renewal and strength to go on. God bless all of you.
We now have the closing song, 579.
Okay, we had an awesome time in the presence of God tonight. Food, lots of food for thought. And we'll just do the first verse of that song and the chorus. To close, a special shout out to Sister Joycelyn Eugene from St. Lucia and Alicia Gustav from St. Lucia, who joined us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you. And to all of our other guests, it was a pleasure for you to join us tonight. 'Tis love that makes us happy. 'Tis love that moves away. It helps us mind. It makes us kind to others every day. God is love. Where is little children? God is love. We would be like him. 'Tis love that makes us happy. 'Tis love that moves away. It helps us mind. It makes us kind to others every day. Oh, God is love. Where is little children? God is love. We would be like him. 'Tis love that makes us happy. 'Tis love that smooths away. It helps us mind. It makes us kind to others every day.
Pastor, can you please close us out with the closing prayer?
Oh yes, what a good night we had in the presence of God. Let us pray. Almighty God and Father in heaven, we want to thank you for this timely presentation, looking at the psychological effects of COVID-19 on our health, our minds, and just tying it off with the spiritual. Oh, loving Father, help us to know that you are in charge. And once you are in charge, we know that we can trust in you. Tonight, I pray for all the visitors, all those who are on this platform, that they would experience that spiritual renewal as they continue to trust in God. As we go through the second half of the week, I pray that you would go before us, behind, around, above, and under, us so that we would continually walk in your presence and experience the joy of knowing you as our personal Lord and Savior. We thank you and we praise you and we give you all the glory. And may we, until we see of ourselves, continue to be faithful, continue to sing and to praise and to lift up your name. In Jesus' precious name, amen and amen. Good night, everybody.